Okay, so we have our MiraVista system here. So as you can notice, we have a misalignment issue. If I unlock the panel lock system, the door will not actually stay latched due to the fact that our margin is too large. Right? So if we're experiencing an issue like this with MiraVista, we have to ensure that on our hinge side that we are still plumb and level. However, if we're out of level out here on our strike side, we can actually correct that with the adjustment that's built into the system. So that's what we're going to go over today. So assuming that everything behind this point is okay, we can actually take this issue out without having to reset the frame or mess with the shims. So in order to do that, we're going to go to our Endura supplied tools, and we're going to get out two specific wrenches out of that package. We're going to get our small gold wrench, and then we have a larger silver wrench here. So we're going to be using both of these today to achieve this adjustment. So we're going to, the step one is going to be to kind of evaluate where we are, right? Like our top margin is not terrible. You know, we like that, but obviously down here at the bottom, you know, we need to go a considerable way towards the actual jam itself. So we're going to be able to do that. So we're going to start down here at the bottom. We can actually adjust these independent of one another. So everything that I tell you you can do down here at the bottom, you can also do at the top, right? So when these come from Endura, they're going to be set at an 1/8 of an inch reveal. From that point, they will actually go away from each other an 1/8 of an inch, which would get you closer to your jam on your strike side, or they'll come together a 1/16 of an inch from that nominal 1/8 that we start at. Obviously today, just for this demonstration, I have messed with the margin here some to create this issue. Nevertheless, everything I say that we're going to do at the bottom, we can also do at the top. So if we want to move the entire door system over an 1/8 of an inch, we could do that by adjusting the bottom and the top the same amount to move the entire door system over against the actual strike jam. So today we're actually representing an issue that only is appearing at the bottom, so we want to leave the top alone. So we're only going to make our adjustments down here. But just understand, you could also do the same thing at the top. The procedure is the same. The first wrench we're going to use is going to be that gold wrench. We're going to be using that here on our set screw. So we're going to loosen our set screw here. No need to take this all the way out, just a couple of rounds is plenty. That's actually going to make the internals so that they can now move. Now in order to move the internals, we're going to switch to our other wrench, and we're going to be placing that into this fastener that you can see exposed here on the left-hand side of this part. Depending on the weight of the door panels and how you're trying to move the system, it can be moved with the actual long side of the wrench. It clears, so this is better for a quick adjustment. However, if that's a little too heavy for you, you can always put this in here, and then that gives you a little bit more leverage to make that adjustment. So today, you'll see that our margin is tight, and we know from what we talked about previously, we need to actually move this active panel away from this other panel to decrease our strike margin. So that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust this. Just for the sake of today, I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. So you can see here, it's actually growing that margin as we make that adjustment. Once I've got that adjustment where I would like it, I'm going to then remove the larger Allen wrench, go back to the smaller Allen wrench, and I'm going to retighten my set screw here. So we're going to go just to tight, and then we're going to just give that a nice snug. So now that we're finished making our adjustment here at this set of knuckles, what we've done is we've actually increased this margin, which pushes that active panel closer to the strike margin itself. So something to keep in mind here is, like we had said, you can make that adjustment here, you can make it at the top. You also have another set of these knuckles that will adjust on the inside of the home between panel 1 and panel 2. So you can spread this level of adjustment out between those adjuster knuckles on the interior side and these on the exterior side to achieve the level of adjustment that you need. Now that we've made our adjustments, you'll see that the actual door is now operable, and we now have our desired strike margin. All right, so for this tutorial, we're going to be talking about adjusting the truck studs in the trucks. So what that's going to do in the MiraVista system is that's going to give us our up and our down adjustment out here on the end where we have all these cantilevered panels. Okay, so when we're adjusting this is actually going to be our sag adjustment for our system. We call it our up and down just because that's very easy to understand. However, what this is really doing is this is reestablishing your sweep margin, or your margin between your seal deck and the bottom of your door panel. It's reestablishing that over here after we have all the sag of all these panels hanging from the actual hinge system itself, right? So this is not really intended to fix an out of level seal system. That is a separate issue. It can help in some of those situations. However, this is really intended to be a sag correction so that the bottom margin is consistent across the door system. So now that we understand what this adjustment is actually going to do for us, now we're going to get some tools. So the bottom nut here, you'll notice, is a thin nut, a jam nut. So in order to get in there, we have supplied you with a thin wrench in our Endura supplied tool bag. However, if you do not have this, you can use a standard wrench. However, with this adjusted all the way down, it can be a bit difficult to get in here. So we really do recommend that you use the wrench provided. So on the wrench provided, you'll notice that this has two separate ends on it. The end that does not have the identifier is going to be the end that we're going to use on this upper hex portion that you see here. The end that does have the identifier on it is going to be what we use to actually tighten our jam nut after we've made our adjustment to ensure that this can't adjust itself back out as we use the door system. So what we're going to do from Endura, these will actually already come tight. The one I have here on display is already loose. However, do you understand that we would use the correct side and we would loosen that jam nut, right? Be mindful that we don't want to scratch our finish back here with our wrench, so just be careful. Now that that's loose, we can actually adjust the system. So we're going to switch over to our other end of our wrench, and now we can either adjust this hex in or out of the knuckle body, which is actually going to raise or lower the door. Keep in mind that as you're adjusting to the left, you're actually raising the door system. Adjusting to the right, or tightening this thread, is actually going to make it lower. So you would adjust this upper nut until you've achieved that sweep margin that would be consistent with what's over on your actual hinge panel. Once you've achieved that level of adjustment, you're going to run your lock nut down against your truck, use the correct end of the tool, and then we're just going to snug that down. Now this adjustment cannot come back out as we use the door system. Okay, so now we're up here at the top of our MiraVista system. So we also have our up and down adjustment up here. However, this is non-load bearing in the sense of the weight of the panels. What this is really doing is this is holding the weight in and out of the opening up here. So you're familiar with what this looks like. However, it's important to remember this is actually flipped from what we saw on the bottom. So just keep in mind, this lower one here is going to be the one that actually does the adjusting. That corresponds with this end of the wrench. The upper one here is actually your lock nut to lock that adjustment in. That is going to be used with the identified side of the wrench. So just keep that in mind when you get to the top. Same procedure, but it's just going to look a little bit different than what you saw at the bottom. We also need to make note that this is an improperly adjusted truck. So a proper adjusted truck at a minimum needs to have this entire bearing surface up inside the track itself, right? So if we stop at that level where this bearing is up just inside this surface, that is going to give us our maximum amount of forgiveness so that if this header does settle, the truck still has a space above it so that it can compensate for that. If we adjust it up any further, we can get it to where the truck is actually flush and up inside the track, which looks a little more aesthetically pleasing, but you are opening yourself up to the risk of, if the door unit settles, you have less room above the truck, could become an issue. So now that we know what our minimum adjustment looks like of putting these bearings up inside that track, what we're going to use to guide us, or what we're going to do now, is we're going to use this bottom portion to actually make that adjustment. You'll notice that it's very loose at this point. There's not a ton of weight up here, as we've previously talked about. So with this astragal bolt locked, it's very easy to adjust this with your fingers, and it's actually quite faster than using the wrench itself. However, if you do have some load up here, that's why we give you the wrench, right? Make that adjustment on this section there. So as you'll see, while I was talking, I went ahead and moved this up. I've got my bearings all the way inside my track, so I'm now at that minimum level of adjustment. What I would now want to do is I now want to go ahead and run that jam nut up against the truck itself, and I'm going to use that wrench to lock that adjustment in. Okay, so one thing I will note, right, is we've talked about what a minimum adjustment looks like. We know that we can go beyond this, but we are causing a potential issue if the header were to actually settle. It could then hit this. So if we do have any settling issues, it's a good idea to go ahead and investigate that from a structural standpoint, make sure there are no issues. So long as it's just the actual jam settling itself, or potentially the heads or the headers setting on the back side of the jam, just a small amount that is acceptable. We need to make sure that we find the lowest point along this track and ensure that this truck still passes below that lowest point. We would never want to adjust any higher than that, or we're going to have definite issues with the truck yet again. If we leave the truck as low as possible while still keeping those black parts inside the track, that's going to give us the most amount of room up here inside the actual truck or inside the track, so that as this settles, the door unit continues to work as intended.